So, Dave, we're going to focus today on issues around leadership in our clarity framework. We talked a lot about businesses and their owners lacking a degree of clarity. How do you think that shows itself in terms of leadership?
Yeah, I think leadership's quite an interesting point because I think again it's something that perhaps people don't necessarily think about on a regular basis because they're stuck doing the doing in a lot of the cases. You know, a lot of the owners are also still dealing with clients. They're still helping support operations. They're still doing some of the marketing in some instances. And so, therefore, they don't naturally think about how they can step back. And I love the phrase, they need to be thinking about working on their business rather than in it. And I think that sometimes lends itself to them thinking about their roles in the business, should I say, and how they manifest themselves at different parts of the day. There's a great leadership framework called situational leadership, and that talks about different types of delegation or coaching or directive nature and things like that. And I think sometimes business owners just need to think about how they can utilize that as they step back from, and ultimately in some instances might want to be thinking about stepping away from the business and what that means for the leadership team that they're leaving behind.
Do you think business owners think of themselves or think of themselves enough as leaders? Is that something that's in their minds?
I mean, that's a great question, and I think that some people do. They genuinely do. They just don't have the time to do it, because they, as I said earlier, they are stuck doing the doing. And there's several people that I know that I've spoken to in the past who have either been dragged back into their business because a key person's left the business, and they've got themselves into what I would see as a real leadership role, and being this real sort of strategic guidance and director, of the business. But then getting dragged back into the day to day means that they lose, not necessarily lose sight of that, but they lose time. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for any business owner or founder, particularly I think in family owned businesses, is having that time to step back and really take a good look at what their business is doing, because that's how they're able to then lead their team and empower people within the business to do their jobs, and therefore then that allows the commercial opportunities to be realised a little bit sooner than they would be normally.
Yeah, we see lots of common themes, don't we? But clearly, no two businesses are the same, no two families are the same, and there are different takes on approaches to leadership. We touched on not thinking yourself a leader, but sometimes can you see leadership getting in the way? Um, Being a leader and wanting to direct the traffic, and that meaning you're not open to other ideas and moving the business forward.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there, because actually leadership in some respects isn't just about the owner in some instances, or the founder, or the shareholders, or whatever you want to label the person who is ultimately responsible and accountable for the business. Actually, leadership's something that for those businesses that have got a number of people in it can cascade down. And actually, for me as well, leadership's something people, I mentioned earlier empowerment, and for me, leadership's a great way to empower people to look after their own specific departments or areas of a business. And so, therefore, some people might not necessarily want to be a leader in the nicest possible way. They quite enjoy being in the day to day and things like that. But I think it's about recognising what leadership means to that individual. And I suspect from your point of view, Paul, there's a number of different legal hats that people put on as well, during that sort of leadership conundrum that they're going through.
Well, that's absolutely right. On a day to day basis in a family owned business, people are wearing lots of hats, and sometimes that can be really significant. On a day to day basis, they don't really think about it, but they could be acting as owner, they could be acting as a manager, a leader. They could be acting as a family member, a father, a mother, a sister, a brother, and understanding your perspective and who you are and how you're making those decisions at any particular point can be relevant. If you are in that leadership position, but you're actually currently making a decision based on, for example, family dynamics, that is going to influence what you do and may not be the right decision.
Yeah, and I think that's quite an interesting point you raised there. Is that it's not for me. It's not so much the hat that they're wearing. It's recognizing that they're wearing that hat as well, and also that other people are aware of what role that person is currently playing in the conversation that's having. Because as you quite rightly point out, a conversation about the family dynamic of the shareholding, for example, of a business versus being the person who's ultimately responsible for the quality of the service or goods that are leaving a particular building are two very different conversations, both from the way they'll approach it, but also from the way that other people might respond to those conversations. So I think again, having that clarity around those conversations you're having as the leader of the business is are crucial.
Yeah, and it's also understanding roles, isn't it? And having round pegs in round holes. So the leader may not be a natural leader, but the business needs leadership. So if it's not you, recognize that and make sure that you're providing that in some other way to the business.
Yeah, and I think again that's a fantastic point because you see it again a lot in larger businesses and in some instances some corporate businesses where the owner of the business has realised they're not the right person to actually be in full control of the business. And whilst it's a £1 billion company I'm about to talk about, but somebody like Gymshark, where Ben Francis, who built that business from the back of his, I think it was his friend's parents' garage, into a £1 billion global fashion brand. Part way through the journey, he realised he wasn't the right person to be the CEO. He didn't understand enough about the way big businesses operated, and he admits it in interviews that he's done. He said, I said I needed to take myself out of that role, bring somebody more qualified in, get to know the business, and now he stepped back in a much better place. And I think sometimes that's quite a strange place, but also can become quite a comfortable place for people to be in when they actually recognise where their strengths lie and actually filling those gaps. Because you know, despite us all thinking, those of us who run our own businesses, that we need to be doing all of the things all of the time, that is not the case. And so therefore what we end up doing is we end up not adding the right or the correct amount of value into our business by focusing on what we're good at. And I think that's quite key as well, is finding those gaps in your own skill set and bringing the right people in, because then you will really get the right commercial growth from the business, because you've got the right people doing the right things at the right time.
Yeah, I think you're really getting to the heart of it there. But often that self awareness is lacking. So the principal shareholder, the founder, maybe they're not the right person to be leading the business anymore, but they don't realise it. And you do get difficult situations where pretty much everyone else realises that, but they don't. I'm sure you see that a lot, Dave.
Yeah, and I think it's quite funny because again it's that balance between the and I never thought I'd be talking about legal stuff on this podcast, Paul, but it's that balance between the legal decision maker and what's best for the commercial reality of the business. And I think those two things, again, in some regards, the smaller the business, the more challenging those views become. But I think what I see is people who are genuinely growing their businesses and want to grow their business are the ones who are having those tough conversations and having those realizations where you may have I don't know, you might have the third generation of the family who are the, for want of a better phrase, controlling shareholders of the business and ultimately the decision makers, but you've got the fourth generation of the family who are the people who are actually running the business. And that friction sometimes can, because we've all been there. We're all from different generations, and therefore the previous generations always say the latest generation don't know what they're talking about and all that sort of good stuff. But actually, what happens with that is just a different way of managing, in some regards, a change process, and things do change and markets change, and having the people in the business who are recognising that, both in a what I'm going to call management position or the leadership of the business, is crucial, because that's where the friendly friction comes from that ultimately bring the business into the modern day and into the right place for what they want to achieve.
Yeah, and as you say, Dave, all of this really comes back to those honest and open conversations. That's easier said than done sometimes within a business, particularly if you have some family dynamics thrown in. But that is the answer, that is the way forward. And if you're looking at succession and different generations, they actually need to be helping each other. But without those conversations opening things up, no progress is made and conflict arises. And hopefully, discussions with us can help facilitate that and move the discussion forward.